And then I was interviewing someone who has an incredibly successful agency group in Nigeria. And he said to me, look, right now, there is someone at Apple at their desk crying because something is on fire. Everybody struggles. Your business will never run on its own. Every day something will go wrong. That is what it is to own a business. And I realized in that moment that nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody. I don't care if it's Barack Obama. I don't care if it's Dangote. I don't care if it's Bill Gates. They do not know what they're doing. They wake up and they are figuring it out until they go to sleep.
This is Bantu, the African Creative Podcast. Hi, and welcome back to Bantu, the African Creative Podcast. I am Adetunji Paul. This is the season finale of season 1 of our podcast. I'd like to thank everyone who has kept up with us and everyone who might be listening in long after this is released. This episode is brought to you by Cyber for Schoolgirls. Did you know that women make up only 24% of the cybersecurity industry? Cyber for Schoolgirls is a non-profit organization working to close that gap by enabling the next generation of female cybersecurity professionals. Visit cyberforschoolgirls.com to sign up for more information and find Cyber for Schoolgirls on LinkedIn to stay up to date. Our final interesting guest is Nnenna Onyewuchi. She's the co-founder and director of strategy of Yellow Brick Road, a renowned creative agency in Lagos, Nigeria. She's also known as the Barefoot Strategist and gives her time to mentoring and speaking about the advertising industry and the challenges of building a brand. We're going to be talking about her creative journey, her career journey, the challenges of running a business, and as usual, some African creative magic. And now, my conversation with Nnenna. Welcome, Nnenna.
Thank you, Adetunji. I'm so excited to be here. It's my first podcast, so I'm a little nervous, but also excited. So
that's great.
And yeah, I'm still not convinced I'm that interesting, but I will. We'll see.
Yeah, we will. Okay, so number 1, please tell us, where did you grow up, Nnenna?
So I grew up actually primarily in the UK. So my siblings are significantly older than me, like 9, 10, 15 years older than me. And so by the time I was, in kindergarten, they were in boarding school in the UK. So my mom, so we lived in London, we lived in Manchester, lived in Oxford for a little bit. And then we moved to Houston. And then I came back to Nigeria for like a year and a half. And I did like primary 1 in Nigeria. And that did not go that did not go well. It's a really interesting story. So, my aunt had a school, my mother's older sister.
Yeah. And
I, freshly arrived from, I think it was England, arrived at the school in Enugu, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were in class one day and the teacher said something. I actually don't remember what it was, but I was just like, that's not how you say it. So they beat me.
Wow.
And reported me to the principal, who was my aunt, right?
Oh, no.
And so I was like, they took me to the principal. I'm like, but if I didn't say anything, that you'll be teaching people this and people will think that the kids that you go to your school don't know how to speak English. And so she sent me home, right? And then she came that evening to the house and said to her sister, you got to send this kid away, man, because they will kill her in this country. And so I went away to boarding school when I was like 8. And so I went to boarding school in the UK.
Okay.
And then after, grade school, high school, and then I went to college in the States and worked in the States for a while. So I guess I grew up primarily in the UK. And then went to America But it was like, you wake up in the UK, you have an American accent. I'm like, because, the base of my accent, like, because I lived in Houston before I went to the base of my accent is actually like Southern American.
Yeah.
Which is why I talk the way I do. And then, I
surprise people everywhere.
Right. And then, but I'm still growing up, right? I don't consider myself an actual grown up yet. So I'm still in the process.
I think I love that so much. So you went to college in United States, and that was UCLA. And
UCLA,
famous, famous UCLA. What did you study at UCLA, and what company did you go right after?
So I did English and African studies. So my plan initially was to go to law school.
Okay.
And so I did English and African studies, which is kind of a cheat, right? Because I'm a reader and I'm an African. My mother was like, but you speak English and you're an African. I don't understand. She was like, study something. But I just, I love literature. And I was really interested in learning more about Africa, actually. And then I took the LSATs. And then I realized that I actually had no desire to be a lawyer. I was just like, I don't want to do that. And so that was probably the first time that I stepped off the path, right? Because I'm a youngest child, my mother's youngest child. I come from a really sort of high achieving family. And, there are certain expectations, right? Like you're a lawyer or a doctor, you're, something that people know what it is, right?
Yeah.
And, I have, my sisters are, lawyers and academics, and that's, we're like, that's what we do. And I just was like, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. And so I got into Columbia, and then I was like, I'm not going. And that was a big, big discussion in my family. But I was like, you can't make me go. I'm not going. But then I had no plan, right? I was living in LA, and I literally didn't know what I was going to do, because for the last 4 years, I had been like, I'm going to go to law school. And, this is a long-winded way to tell you where I went to work after college. And so I moved to LA. So I stayed in Los Angeles for a year and worked in the Graduate School of Education, actually, at UCLA, grant writing. Because my girlfriend, I graduated the year before my girlfriend. And so I stayed in LA for an extra year until they graduated.
Yeah.
And then my cousin, she's a recording artist, and she was signed with Sony in Germany. And she had a single out, and they were trying to break her in the American market. So she was in New York for the summer of, 1997. Lord, I'm old. So I went to New York to hang out with her for the summer, and I loved it. Fell in love with New York.
I hear it's beautiful.
And then she was like, well, I got to go back. She's like, I've got to go back to Germany. And I was like, okay, I got to pay rent. I have to find a place to live. And luckily, I have family in New York who put me up for a little while. But I needed a job, right? And I wanted to work in publishing, because this was 1997, and we didn't yet know that publishing was not going to be a thing. And so I signed up for one of these recruitment agencies, and they got me a temp job. And so my first real job was in the marketing department of the jewelry division of Avon. And I don't know if you know Avon.
I do know Avon.
Right. And Avon is an amazing company, right? So people know Avon skincare, but they do fashion, they do jewelry, they do all of this stuff, right? And it's catalog work, right? But for me, what was really interesting is that it was the first time that I really understood forecasting. Right? I didn't know anything about marketing. I don't think that I really even understood that there was a job called marketing. It was not something that I had any idea of. But I got this job, and they hired me. I was supposed to be there for a week to catalog some jewelry. Ended up spending 6 months there. And they were some of the smartest people I've ever met, because their job was to figure out which of the kind of big high fashion runway trend would fly in Middle America. And they had to have product ready and produced in time for when the trend hit like Ohio, right? And so they really, really understood their customer. They really, really understood trend. And it was amazing to me. I just thought this is like mind control on a mass scale. Like there's some person like sitting in New York who has to decide what, moms in Ohio are going to be wearing 8 months from now. And I just found it fascinating. But I still wanted to work in publishing. Right?
Okay.
Because, you're young and you're stupid, right? And then the headhunting agency I was working for, the girl who was sort of the that I was working with, so I have this job. I know you're not thinking about advertising, but I have this job that I think would be great for you. So I went and literally did the worst interview ever, right? Not that it went badly, but I just did all the things that you're not supposed to do. First, I used to have, when I still have the afro, but I had some massive afro. And I combed my hair all the way out because, when I was in my 20s, I was like, they got to see me as I am. I'm not, and this is like 1997.
Yeah.
So natural hair was not a fit, right?
Yeah.
I go there with my massive afro. I do no research. So I get there and they're like, so what do you know about us? I'm like, nothing. My headhunter said I should come, so I'm here. Because I was really chasing the publishing job, right?
Yeah.
But the woman who interviewed me, who went on to be the head of HR, actually, an amazing woman named Barbara Joel, recommended me for the next interview. Still do not know why to this day, because I literally could not have impressed her in that interview because I was like, I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about what you do. I don't. But then she scheduled an interview with the VP of the group that I'd be working. I was interviewing for a job in business development. I interviewed with the VP of the group, and we had Lisa, and it's not even an interview, right? We had the most raucous conversation. I was there for like an hour and a half, and we just laughed hysterically. And she said to me, Margie is going to love you. And Margie Altschuler was the EVP of the group at the time. And so they called me back for so I just kept getting called back for interviews, right?
Yeah.
And then I interviewed with Margie and I fell in love with her. So I always say that I did not go to work for McCann Erickson. I went to go work for Margie Altschuler because I was like, this is someone that I want to learn from. And, Margie was, she was really sweet and, she liked me and she offered me the job. Actually, by the time I left McCann, by the time I got back to Avon, they'd already made me an offer. And so I went to work for McCann Erickson, New York as the new business coordinator, I think was my first title, which is like essentially as an admin position. And I helped Margie manage new business pitches for the New York office and then global pitches that were handled out of New York.
Interesting.
But I literally had no idea what advertising was. So like I show up the first day and I'm like, I don't know what these people do here. Right.
Yeah.
So I was like, but I came to work for Margie. Right? And that was how I started in 1997, my first job in advertising. March 1997, I started at McCann.
You started at McCann Erickson. When you leave McCann, and I'm guessing this was a really, really interesting experience for you personally, maybe life-changing, perhaps something almost prophetic that the course of your life was almost set into motion from that experience. How did you go from new business development to vice president of strategy? So
I worked in business development. I worked in new business for 2 years. And, new business in an agency, in a big agency, you're running a race every day. Like I used to work like 90 hours a week. It was hectic, right? And I was exhausted. And it was also, in the beginning, it's really exciting. And it was great for me because, in new business, you learn how an agency works really quickly. You get to see how all the pieces fit together. Because when you're pitching, right, you see all the departments work together, right? If you start off in creative or client service, you never really get to see how all the pieces fit. And I got to spend time with a lot of really, really senior people, a lot of really smart people from the McCann network across the world. But I was exhausted. And also, you do the pitches, and we had a really great run. I think that we won like 18 pitches in a row, right? It was really great, but like you pitch this work and then you never see the client again, right?
Yeah.
And after a while, it's just sort of like you're on this wheel, but that it doesn't go anywhere. And because I was, 6 years old, right? I was still a baby, and I just thought, I need to go work maybe at a smaller agency. But I just thought, okay, I'll just go do business development for a smaller agency. So I went to Margie and I said to her, I love you, but I'm tired. I'm exhausted, and I need something different. I need a different pace. I need a life.
Yeah.
So someone has offered me a job in business development at this small agency, and I can help them grow, and I can have more of a say. And she just said to me, if you want to change your life, the answer is not to go do the same thing somewhere else. And she said, would you consider something else at McCann? And I hadn't really thought about that, to be honest. And the only department that made sense for me was planning. That's what it was called at the time, strategic planning. Because I'm not nice enough to be a client service person. I'm not. I don't like people enough to do that. And I'm not interesting enough to be creative, but I loved strategy. And the heads of strategy at McCann at that time were Suresh Nair and Nat Puccio, who are two of the smartest people I have ever met in my life. And I was like, if I was going to go anywhere, I want to go work for Nat and Suresh, because what they do is really interesting to me. And so she talked to Nat and Suresh, and they very kindly offered me a home in planning. And it was nice because, McCann at the time, I think it was like 1,200 people, but the planning department was only 14. And, McCann Erickson then was also a very white male Irish Catholic agency. It's not called McCann Erickson for nothing. But planning was one. Suresh was one lead, and Nat, who is Sicilian, who didn't really consider himself white. And so we had one of the most diverse departments in the agency. So it was a great place to be, 24.
Yeah.
And I worked for an amazing lady called Stacey McInnes, who just was magic, right? And Stacey really, from the beginning, just taught me, but more importantly, Stacey really, she took me under her wing, right? Stacey would take me to every meeting. She got me great exposure, not just at McCann, but, with other McCann World Group agencies. Stacey pushed me to present early, really helped me work on my craft. And so, I think that, I owe my career to Margie and Stacey. I don't think that I would be where I am without those two women. Yeah. And so I was working in planning for a couple of years, and I had a partner, Kevin, that I worked with a lot. And then one day we were like, look, we're not excited by what we're working on. And I think we were maybe drinking a little bit. Like, we should start a practice group within the agency so we can work on lifestyle brands, because people don't bring cool stuff to McCann. And so, with the arrogance of youth, we made a proposal.
Okay.
And sent it to the GM of the office. And he was like, sure. And we were like, oh God, now we're going to do it.
Yeah, I was going to say that you probably, you did it with so much, yes, you thought this was going to go well. You hoped it would go well. But when it actually went well, you're like, oh shit.
No, we didn't even, I think we did it, but we didn't really think, I didn't think anything would come of it, because we were literally 26.
Yeah.
But, to his credit, the GM of the New York office was like, yeah, and gave us a bunch of money, and was like, now you got to go build this thing. And so we were like, all right, now we got to build it, right? And so it was called Tag Ideation, and we built a proprietary strategy model. We it's interesting now, there's all of these sort of like ethnographic research tools.
Yeah.
But at the time, like we built things that we were doing stuff that nobody was doing, right? So like ethnographic research that's a big thing in marketing right now. But then people did focus groups and that was it. But we were like, no, we had all of these things. We would like, what was it? It was called Switch, where we would have people like, trade places. We would have people like live without something that they loved for a week and like do video diaries, like all of this like really cool and interesting stuff, right? Because we were just like trying things.
Yeah.
And I remember, so McCann had like this big launch for tag ideation, and they invited like, was it 300 or something like that of like their key clients from across the network. And Kevin and I had to put together this presentation. So now we have to like prove out, right? Like we built this model, we have to prove it works. We have to, show them the research. We did some trend forecasting, all of this stuff. And we had this presentation. And I remember that morning, I was so scared. I threw up.
Oh, no.
And I remember like I'd gone and I was just the anxiety. And I came out of the bathroom and Suresh, who was my boss at the time, and I said to him, look, I can't do this. I was like, I'm terrified. I cannot do this. I don't think I can do this. And he was like, yeah, sure. You'll be fine. And so we went into the room. I remember like looking out at this room of like senior clients and just thinking to myself, like, what do I know about anything, right? And Kevin presented first, and then I had to get up and present. And to this day, I do not remember a single thing I said.
Wow.
Like the whole thing is a blank because I was so afraid. I literally, to this day, have no idea what I said. All I know is I got up there and for like a good 15 seconds, like my mind was blank. And then I started talking and then people were clapping. That's all I remember.
And that's just how God works.
Yeah, right. But they clapped. Like nobody threw anything at me. And then that was it. And then, then we had tag and we did some really cool stuff. And it was really the first time that I understood that, communication is not just the ad, right? We did product development. We had solutions. We made a video game. We made a coffee table book. We did, it was the first time that I really understood that a lot of times the ad is not the answer in communications. So that's how I made VP, because then they were like, yeah, we can't have these kids running a group without a title. So I made VP and I got a significant pay rise. And so that was nice.
Wow. I think I like this story because there is something that has been happening in the industry sort of recently. And this idea of having diverse strategy teams is now, people used to say that they used to try their best back in, the 2000s, but there are very few places that were doing it well. And even then realizing that sometimes the answer isn't always an ad, and it's not always mass market communication. And there are agencies that I know of right now that are just coming to this realization and trying to now produce things other than ads, in a world where we have needed things other than ads for a very long time. It's not always an app. Remember that time? Everything was everything was an app, but it's not always an app. It's not always the same thing that you make. And so I wonder if this is sort of a guiding strategy or guiding philosophy for you, especially with the way you approach your craft. Is it very sort of broad, wide, or has other characteristics?
I learned strategy from Suresh Nair and Nat Puccio. And the McCann system is all about effectiveness, right? Yeah. That is McCann's glory is like they don't win at Cannes, they win at the Effies, they win effectiveness awards. And so McCann's whole thing then was, how do we move the client's bottom line? And so from a strategic perspective, you're always looking for the answer that would move the business forward. You weren't looking for what would make the great ad. I tell people all the time that, when I went to work in advertising, I didn't know anything about advertising, like literally nothing. Right? Yeah. I think the only thing I knew about advertising was like what I'd seen in movies. One of my first sort of experiences, I came to McCann just around the time that they won MasterCard. And so I got to see that campaign come together, the Priceless campaign.
Yeah.
And, MasterCard was like a distant number 3 in the credit card industry. And I saw how that campaign changed the fortunes of that business, right? And they went from number 3 to number 1. And I just thought, this is it. It's not, the pretty pictures. And yes, it's great to have the great TV ad that makes you cry or laugh or smile.
Yeah.
But the job of the work we do is to like change the fortunes of a business. And that for me was like, that's amazing. Actually, in my interview with Margie, she always says like the thing that got her. She was like, what appeals to you about what we do? I was like, I don't know anything about advertising, but I think it's mind control on a mass scale, and I want the people that I will never meet will do something because of something that I thought, right? And for me, that is the power of what I do. Is that I will have an idea, and 6 months, 1 year down the line, somebody somewhere who will never know me will spend money that maybe they weren't planning to spend, or will think something or do something because of something that I thought.
Yeah.
And that is powerful. And so for me, it's always when I'm thinking about strategy, like, what are we trying to achieve? In a strategy, I always say it's really simply, it's how you get from where you are to where you want to be. And whatever it takes to get there. And, for a business, where they are and where they want to be is different for every business. It's different at every time. And so the answer can't be the same because the situation is always different. The context is different. The audience is different. And so it's always about what is the shortest distance between A and B, or the most, or maybe not sometimes not the shortest. What is the most effective distance between A and B? How am I going to unlock the sale? And sometimes it's an app and sometimes it's not, right?
Yeah.
Even back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I understood that you have to be channel agnostic. Right?
You do.
You have to do what serves the idea best. So that's my approach, right? I don't think about channel. I think about the problem I'm trying to solve, and then the channels come because they're the ones that make sense given my audience and my problem, right?
That makes sense. Yeah, totally. It's important. I talk to people who are close to me about being holistic, and it's one of two things. You either decide that you're not going to really care about channel, and you're just going to do whichever one you feel comfortable with. It's not really based on where the audience is. It's just the one I know. And there's also being very, very specific about, well, this is what I want. And I can look at the whole, all my possible channels, or I could look at the things that make one particular channel work over the other. And it's probably, something I guess that you've carried with you with the jobs that you then took on after McCann. So Yellow Brick Road starts somewhere around 2011, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But you have a lot of experience in Nigeria before Yellow Brick Road. What happened leading up to the point where you felt so compelled to start your own company?
So I moved back to Nigeria in 2004. And at that point I had been working in advertising for like 8 or 9 years or whatever it was. And I didn't want to work in advertising anymore. But, I moved back to Nigeria a little bit precipitously, I guess. My mother passed away and I just was like, packed my bags and came home. Right.
No.
I even though it's worked out for me, I would don't make a decision. Don't make a decision like at the worst time in your life. But I was just like, I can't. And I just got on a plane and packed the suit, and I put all my, and I didn't know that I put my stuff in storage in the States because I wasn't sure that I could stay. I hadn't lived in Nigeria since I was like 8 years old. Right.
Yeah.
But I really couldn't imagine going to my mother's funeral and then going back to New York. I don't know. I just was like, I can't. Right.
Yeah.
And I came back. So I had no plan. I had nothing. I just sort of got on a plane and came home. And that is, I guess, one of the, I think my life is a series of instances of like just great luck, right? And one of the blessings of my life is I have an amazing family who are incredibly supportive. And so when I moved home, my cousin took me in. She's like, just come stay with me. And so I lived with her and her family for a year. And my other cousin kind of just took me by the hand and just started introducing me to people. And I interviewed, no lie, I feel like I interviewed at every company in Nigeria at the time, like everywhere, like investment banking. And like, there's nowhere that I didn't go.
Wow.
Nothing felt right. Because, at the time, the idea of like institutional Nigeria was just not something that I was willing to do. I was like, I can't go, like in all of the interviews that I had with like the big companies, it just felt wrong to me.
I get that.
Right. I couldn't go work for Shell or for like some bank. It just was, I went and I interviewed him. I'm like, I don't know, this is not for me. But there was a gentleman called Chris Parks who had an experiential agency. And when I had, before I moved back, even though I moved back suddenly, but before that, I had been thinking about moving back, right? So I had this 5-year plan. I want to make VP. And then I did that. I made VP. I had my own group. I did all of that. And at the end of my 5-year plan, I was like, I don't know if New York is for me, right? And my mother was like, just come home. Just pack your bag and become me. And so I've been thinking about Nigeria. I had a couple of friends that had moved back at the time. And so I was talking to my cousin and he said, oh, well, there's this guy who owns, it's not an advertising agency, but he's in marketing. He knows the industry well. He's a good person to talk to about what the industry is like. And there's a gentleman called Chris Parks. He's an English guy, actually. He's been living in Nigeria for forever. And so like one day I went to go see him and I didn't go look for a job. I just actually was like, he was really, we emailed back and forth when I was in New York and he'd been really like open and generous with his time and his thoughts. And so I really just went to like meet him and be like, thank you so much for, everything that you've done just in terms of like helping me understand the lay of the land here. And so I went to go see him and, as is kind of always the thing with every job I've had.
What happened?
We just went and we had a really great conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
And at the end of it, he was like, do you want a job? I was like, I don't know anything about event marketing. He's like, it doesn't matter. Just come. You're smart. You'll learn. So my first job in Nigeria was in event marketing. And people were like, what is a strategist, right? What is a strategist? You don't know what that is. And so I worked at CPMS for a year. And then because, strategy in experiential then wasn't really a thing. And then there's a gentleman called George Thorpe, who is amazing and owns one of the premier marketing groups in Nigeria. And they were starting production units. And he was like, will you come and run marketing? We wanted to kind of change the way that Nollywood works and change the way that content works and, make different kinds of films and make different kinds of music and do things properly. And I was like, sounds great. And I went to what was then called Small World Media. And that didn't really work out. But George was like, because you came here because of me, and it's not really working out. The business isn't doing well. So he seconded me to TBWA Concept. But they already had a head of strategy. So I went to work, kind of new business, kind of client service. It's not really my thing. So I was at TBWA for a while and that was great. They were an amazing group of people. But, I'm a strategist, right? I'm not a client service person. Like I don't like people enough. And then from there, I went to High TV. It was a pay TV platform that was going to take on DSTV. And I really, really loved the idea of that challenge.
I remember when that came out.
Right. But it was a great idea, but the business model was, and I, I'm a strategist. I need, I think kind of in straight lines. And High TV was a bunch of curves. The founder of High TV was someone that I'd known for a very long time since I was a child, really. And I was like, our personal relationship was more important to me than the job. And I said, if I stay here, we will not continue to be friends. So let me leave.
Oh.
So we cannot be friends. And another childhood friend of mine was working at ZK Advertising at the time. He was a creative director. And they didn't have a strategist. And they had a pitch. They were pitching, it was FCMB, I believe, at the time. And so he said, will you come and help us with this pitch? And so I went and I helped them with the pitch, and got to know the MD. And he said to me, just come and work here. And so I did. And so I went to go work for ZK. So between 2004 and 2007, I think I had like 6 jobs.
Wow.
Right? But then I got to ZK in 2007. And then in 2011, Calico and I did a management buyout, and we became Yellow Brick Road.
You guys did a what, sorry?
A management buyout. We bought the agency.
You bought the agency?
Yeah. So ZK was, it was actually amazing. It was, at the time, the only African-owned Pan-African agency network. But there was one client across the network, was Celtel, and became Zain. But when Airtel bought Zain, there was an agency realignment, and ZK lost the business.
Right.
And the owner decided to sell up.
Right.
Sale in Nigeria wouldn't have been a good thing because the agency that was buying, though, to be fair, their management had actually reached out to me already.
Yeah.
And had put me, but I was like, look, I have these people here that are working for us. The acquisition wasn't going to be good for us. So and I was actually going to go just get another job. I never thought of myself as someone who's going to own a business. I was like, I don't want that kind of stress. I'm just essentially lazy. And also, what do I know about running a business? But the MD at the time, who is now my partner, was just like, we should do this, right? We have all these ideas about what we would do if the agency was ours. We should just do it. I really was not on board, right? Because I just, I don't know anything about running a business. I mean, I was voted least likely to do anything useful.
Oh.
Right. But, I was talking to my oldest sister, my big sister. And I was just like, I don't know. And she was like, what is the worst that could happen? Like literally. First of all, she's like, first you work like it's your own already. So it's not, you're already as invested as you would be if it was actually yours.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, the worst thing that can happen is that you will fail, right? That's the worst that can happen. But nobody will die if you fail. If it all ends up in tears and blood, nobody will die, and you will just have management experience on your resume, and you will always be able to find a job, right? You've been doing this long enough and you're good enough at it that you will always be someone that someone wants to hire. So just do it. I was like, all right, I guess, right? Because that's the thing. It's like, when we have anxiety,
yeah, we're
always afraid of what will happen. And so now I'm like, I always ask myself, what's the worst thing that can happen? You will fail. And then, so in 2010, we negotiated and went through everything. And in 2011, we rebranded the agency to Yellow Brick Road. Yellow Brick Road was born out of a crisis, right? Because the thing that instigated the sale of ZK was that we lost the then Zain business, and it was 70% of our income.
Oh.
And so overnight, we went from being one of the best paid agencies in Nigeria to like literally nobody. And it was a really, really long way to fall.
Yeah.
And it happened literally overnight. And it also wasn't because of anything that we'd done, right? And so that was hard. And look, people like to see you fall, right? And so that first year of Yellow Brick Road was really hard. We pitched literally. When I think back now, I'm just like, oh, Lord, we pitched. Like if you were opening a door, we would go pitch, right? But we, slowly, literally inch by inch. I tell people all the time, like the first year, I used to go home and cry every day because I was like, we had to get rid of like a third of our staff, which was like awful. And thankfully, I will always love Calico because he didn't make me do it. Right? He did the hard things. I just went home and cried. And he had to sit there and tell, like 25 people, right, that they didn't have a job anymore. But yeah, we traded our way out of the hole every day. You go home, you cry, you wake up in the morning, you wash your face, you go and you start again, right? And 1, 2 years, 3 years, and you look around and you have a business.
And it's working.
And so, I don't have like any like this big inspiring story about we had a dream and a vision. No, like literally we were in the trenches in a foxhole trying to protect ourselves and our staff from mortar fire. That literally is it. We battled every day. And we still do, right?
I hope it doesn't feel like the trenches anymore.
Oh, it always feels like the trenches. But it was but it's interesting, right? Because when you start a business, there is in the back of your mind an assumption that at some point the business will get to a point where it's stable and it will kind of run itself. That is not true. Running a business is kind of like being an adult, right? You essentially lurch from catastrophe to disaster with like periods of calm in between. And running a business is really lonely because, and that's why I don't understand people who do it without a partner, because as much as, we can drive each other crazy, like I would literally not have survived the last 10 years without him. A couple of years ago, I was invited by the Zambian Marketing Association to come and speak. And usually when I'm invited to speak, I speak about strategy, but they wanted me to come and talk about my journey as an entrepreneur, which is really bizarre because I don't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. Like I know that I own a business, but I don't think of myself as a business owner. I know it's strange.
I know.
And I was, nobody wants to hear about my journey because, I'm like, there was no plan. We were just
this and this happened.
MacGyvering it as we went along.
My agency lost the business.
Right. My agency lost the business. We were like, sure, why not? And it hasn't gone down in flames yet. Right. That's not a great speech.
Yeah.
And so I went and I interviewed other entrepreneurs. And I interviewed, people who had started incredibly successful businesses, right? I interviewed someone who started one of the now major banks in Nigeria. But I also interviewed people whose businesses had failed. I interviewed people whose businesses had just started and people who had been in business for like 30 years. And it was really comforting to realize, because when you're running a business, what you see is other people's output, right?
Yeah.
And on the outside, it's like the duck principle. You see the duck gliding and you have no idea that it's paddling furiously underneath because you can't see its feet. And that's kind of what it is to be an entrepreneur. Everybody else seems to be coasting and you're just like, and I am just here sweating. And it can make you feel stupid, right? And it can make you feel incompetent because you're like, how am I still having the same struggles? Why are we still like dealing with the same issues after 3, 4, 5, 6 years? And then I was interviewing someone who has an incredibly successful agency group in Nigeria. And he said to me, look, Right now, there is someone at Apple at their desk crying because something is on fire. Everybody struggles. Your business will never run on its own. Every day something will go wrong. That is what it is to own a business. And I realized in that moment that nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody. I don't care if it's Barack Obama. I don't care if it's Dangote. I don't care if it's Bill Gates. They do not know what they're doing. They wake up and they are figuring it out until they go to sleep. And literally nobody knows what they're doing. And that's okay. It was so freeing for me because I'm just like, okay, it's okay to be figuring it out. That's it. So we are still because we're still figuring it out every day.
You've come this far. So
yeah.
The figuring out has to be doing something, I wanted to find out from you have you, past or present commissioned, say, an independent African creative person, could be illustrator, pottery maker, someone who's probably just not your conventional musician or a film director, just to work on a piece or client project, just because you knew that bringing in this talent was necessary?
Oh, all the time. So, the answer is not always an ad, right? But we make ads. That's what we know how to do. We're not, even though we have within, one of the things that we talk about in hiring, right, is you want to hire capacity plus, right? To an art director plus, you are a client service person plus. What is the additional skill that you have? It might be language. It might be, so we have, in our creative department, we have a lot of painters. We have photographers. We have people that make clothes, make fashion. We have, in our client service department, there's a girl that makes bags. So we just generally like to hire people that have additional skills, but also, right, we collaborate with people to make film, right, to make art, to make music. We once did a pitch. I'll never forget this. We did this pitch to an oil and gas company, and at the pitch, we had a spoken word artist come and perform one of the pieces that we wanted to share with them.
Is that on video?
No.
I wish it was.
But and so do I. But it was great. Like it's years and years ago. We were like, and we have this thing. It's really powerful, but we need someone that can deliver it properly. And so, we were at the picture like, okay, we just give us a second, and we opened the door and brought in this dude, and he came in and he performed, and then left. And that's what won us the pitch. We work a lot with First Bank, and gosh, 2-3 years ago, they were doing their annual calendar, right? It's not that exciting. But we found this painter who I'd worked with very, very early in his career. It was really beautiful, like modern African, like contemporary African art. And he created 12 pieces, right? Mm-hmm. For their calendar. But they were actual pieces that now hang in their office, right? We have, we do community theater. We have a section of our business that's it's YBR Impact, and we work in solely on development work, social behavior change. And so we have worked with playwrights because we do community theater. We have pitched film ideas. We once pitched an idea to do branding on pure water sachets, right? So we are
okay.
Like because it was, oh gosh, it was this thing, and we wanted to have cold to give out pure water and then have a message on the back, which is not super ecologically friendly, but would have just gotten us mass reach. Sure. So we did a small pilot of it. The client didn't roll it out, but the one we did, the little thing that we did was actually really impactful. But the client was like, I don't know if I want my brand on pure water. So we are always looking for collaborators, whether it's in technology, whether it's in, the visual arts, whether it's in sound, because again, you just want to find what is the thing that's going to connect to your audience to get them to listen. Because that's a big thing, right?
Yeah.
We live in an incredibly competitive attention economy, right? Attention is now like the scarcest resource. And so, I tell my guys all the time, you've got 3 seconds before your customer moves on. And so whatever it is that's going to get me to like 5, 6, 10 seconds, I'm going to do. And I'm going to find the person who can do it best. And if that person, makes sculptures out of Lego, then that's it.
That's the approach. That is really the approach. And you touched upon this idea of collaboration. In the past, when we spoke of this particular recording, and you said that, you knew someone who ran a creative business or creative agency, and all their clients came from outside Nigeria. And one of the things that, at least that this podcast is trying to really draw out, is the idea of international collaboration in Africa with the creative industry. And that includes both, independent artists and the agencies that work in it. Is this sort of system where, all your clients are from outside, is that something that's pretty common from your perspective in the ad industry or creative industry right now in Africa and Nigeria? Or is it just more, a few people have all their business from abroad, but, most of us have to deal with the local market?
I think most people in any country will have primarily domestic clients because that's the country that you're in, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere in Ireland. 70% of the businesses in Ireland are Irish, right?
Yeah.
So the bulk of your clients are always going to be from where you are, because that's where you are. And those are the businesses that are selling to the customers who are in the markets, right?
Yeah.
So whether they're a multinational or not, the vast majority of people pushing products and services in Nigeria are Nigerian, selling to Nigerians. So that's always going to be, I think, everywhere in the world, the bulk of your markets, just because that's how things go. People buy the things that are there, right?
Yeah.
I think that, the person that I'm talking about, she works in the digital space where geography is less important. And so I think that as you get into, if you have a non-physical product, right? If you are just selling ideas or services that don't require like physical proximity, then yes, it's possible. But if you're selling soup,
yeah,
you're not selling soap in Nigeria from Azerbaijan. You're selling soap from Nigeria to Nigerians in Nigeria. So I think that the geography and the importance of geography and proximity is also a function of what it is that you're selling. If it's a physical product, you kind of got to be there.
Yeah, of course.
If it's not physical, then, from anywhere now.
So do you think that there's something to be said about, say, for example, I'm a creative person. I want to sell my illustrations and I want to do editorial illustrations for some publication in Ireland, but I'm in Nigeria, or I'm a Nigerian small agency of 5, and we would really like to get international clients just to peddle our services too. But, we're in Nigeria and we can't reach Irish clients. Now, the buyers involved, going through the agencies, as far as it, is this something that has a good chance of happening? Outsider brand wants to sell something and they get a Nigerian illustrator or agency to do it. Or, outsider brand wants to sell something in Nigeria and they hire sort of someone who's based sort of outside Nigeria, but also creative from Nigeria to do it. Is this something internationally that we could do or has potential to happen?
No, look, absolutely. I think, sort of going back to the idea of at an executional level, I think if you are creating like illustrations or music or you're a director, right?
Yeah.
You can work anywhere because I think, look, creativity travels, right?
Yeah.
If you have a skill, that skill is applicable everywhere. You just have to understand the audience enough to produce something that works for them. So, we work when we shoot ads, we work with directors from all over the world. One of my favorite directors is Portuguese. Right? He's not Nigerian, but he has a great eye, right? And I like the way that he tells stories, but he's Portuguese. He's not
That's
Nigerian.
Interesting.
But he doesn't write scripts for Nigeria. He doesn't know the market enough, but he can take a script and make that story beautiful. There are people who, look, the Nigerian aesthetic. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the new Kelly Rowland song. I mean, it's essentially a tribute to Fela, right? So, like literally horns and everything. So I think that, look, skill and capacity travels, right? Talent is universal. What I think is important is it going to connect to your audience? And as long as it does that, it really doesn't matter where it's from. You cannot go anywhere in this world, like literally anywhere, and not hear Nigerian music.
True.
Like there's nowhere, literally there's nowhere in the world that you go right now where you will not hear Nigerian music. There is nowhere where there are Black people that you will not see Nigerian movies. Now, increasingly, you see Nigerian or African inspired fashion across the world.
Yeah.
You're seeing, an African aesthetic in comic books. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday about, Black comic book makers and the retelling and the recasting of superheroes in our image, right? So yes, as the world gets smaller, as people and everyone is always looking for new, interesting difference. And Africa is still unexplored in many ways. And so I think absolutely that our skilled craftsmen in whatever discipline, if you're really good at something and you understand your audience enough to deliver something that works for them, absolutely. If you are an illustrator in Nigeria, you should be able to sell work to Japan or China or Timbuktu. Because what matters is it good and does it connect?
Perhaps that's something that's a superpower for people who are African creatives. And you make a really solid point. So we've talked a lot about your perspective, and one of the things I just like, I close out with all of the time on all of these episodes is because we're talking about the African context, and because I'm sneaky, I'd like to throw you a sort of two double questions in one, because I think it'll make for a more interesting ending. So first thing is, what is it that you want to see from our creative industry that would help you do more creative work for your clients? And added to that, what's something that you can get in Africa that you can't get anywhere else?
What I would like to see from our creative industry is even more courage, right? I just think we must be brave. We must be brave enough to think beyond our borders, right? We have to be brave enough to say, actually, I don't have to move to America to do business there. Or I don't have to go anywhere. I can do it from here because they want us. Because what you can't get anywhere else is the thing that makes us us, right? What you can't get outside Africa is Africa. There is an energy and a vibe and a resourcefulness and an inventiveness. A lot of it because we have to find ways through, over, under, right? Around.
Yeah.
We gotta make, look, I remember, years and years ago when I was still working in experiential, and I used to make a joke about a dancing girl on truck, right? This sort of moving town storming thing that we do in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And like one day I was sort of, and it's so common, right? And I was talking to one of my old colleagues in New York. And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm just working on this like dancing girl on truck situation. He was like, what is that? I was like, oh, well, you just, it's a moving rig and you put, a DJ and some people on it and you take it to like markets. And he was like, yo, that is so dope. I'm gonna do that. Right. And they did like this whole summer promotion for, I forget which brand it was, where they did dancing girl on truck. And it was super innovative in America because nobody had thought to put, hot young girls on a rig and drive around town. So there are things that we do that seem everyday, kind of pedestrian to us.
Yeah.
That other people are like, that's so hot, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, so when I talk about being brave, it's for us to lean into that and really believe that we're better than them. That's what I want us to believe. Not that we're as good at, we're better. Right? And to continue to tell our stories, to continue to put forward our vision. Because, so this is my first time really spending time in Cotonou. And, it's literally, it's like 2 hours away from Nigeria, right?
Yeah.
But it's so different. And you drive another 4 hours, you're in another country, and it's different. And that's what we have to lean into. That's what we have to lean into. That's what I want, is for us to celebrate ourselves and just realize that, look, the world is looking to us now because, look, the West is tired, right?
Yeah.
They run out of stories. They run out of visuals, This is why, it feels like, if you think about movies, everything is a remake now.
Yeah.
We still have so many stories to tell. And there is an energy on this continent. There is a resourcefulness. There is an inventiveness. There's just a straight hustle that you just don't find anywhere else.
Yes.
And yeah, I think what you can find in Africa that you can't find anywhere else is Africa. It's our superpower.
Africa is our superpower.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Nnenna, for coming on the show. There is honestly a real chance that I might ask you to come back because I think there's still a lot that we haven't unpacked, especially from an abstract point of view. But I am so glad that I've been able to get your experience and your perspective on the state that we find ourselves in, the African creative state, because as we close out this season, it's just been one lesson after the other. And we went from learning about communality to the trials of the African struggle and really understanding with you that there are places we can go that we haven't explored yet. And I am grateful for you to be the final guest on our season. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. So this is, like I said, this is my first podcast. So thank you for that. And as you know, I was worried that I wouldn't be an interesting guest. So I'm glad that you're not like, oh my God, she was so boring.
No.
And, and thank you for doing this. I think we have to talk more about the things that we do.
Yeah.
And we need to share more our struggles and our solutions. I think that we need to inspire ourselves. And which is why I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, which is just one, allowing people to understand the opportunity and the possibilities that are open to them. And so I guess if I will leave, I guess, with any last thought, it's, for if you are an African creative, whether you're on the continent or in the diaspora, is to really lean into your dreams and go boldly in the direction of your ambitions. Because who you are and where you're from is the thing that makes you powerful, right? You are not great in spite of it. You are great because of it. Yeah, that's what I would. If I'm going to end with anything, that would be it.
That's a really beautiful note to end on. And where can we find more of your awesomeness on the internet?
So you can find me on Instagram at The Barefoot Strategist. You can find me on LinkedIn at Nnenna Onyewuchi. And I'm on Twitter, but I'm not really on Twitter. So Instagram is probably the best place to find me right now. And then obviously also yellowbrickroad.com.ng is the agency website.
Thank you so much. This has been the Bantu Podcast, episode 5 of season 1, our season finale. And it is me and Nnenna Onyewuchi. We'll be back, but at a later date. You've been listening to Nnenna of Yellow Brick Road. Please follow her to stay up to date with her appearances and her agency. This was our season 1 finale episode of Bantu, the African Creative Podcast. This episode was written and produced by me, Adetunji Paul, executive producer Blessing Usoro. Our music this week was produced by Arieenati and Odzz Music. Higher by Thames was written and performed by Thames and produced by Audio Tribe. Bantu, the African Creative Podcast, is a production of Studio Black. We're on Instagram at Studio BLVCK, on Twitter at Studio BLVCK_, and our website is studioblvck.com. Be sure to sign up for updates on the next season of Bantu, the African Creative Podcast. We will be taking a break until early next year, and then we'll be back with more African creative magic for you, our dear listeners. Thank you once again, and goodbye from Africa.